People talk about duck hunting culture in a lot of different places of the country and in the world, but I would challenge any place to match the culture of duck hunting in Arkansas.
Situated along the Mississippi Flyway, the natural state is a bed and breakfast of sorts for wintering waterfowl, offering the perfect combination of food and habitat. As ideal as it may be,
I would say over the last 5 or 6 years, what I've seen more than anything else is that the number of birds that are available to shoot in Biomeda has dramatically decreased.
Meet Matt Mosler, a former TV meteorologist turned pastor and an avid duck hunter. He runs Crosshairs Retreat Center in Arkansas County, a duck lodge used for ministry. Mosler's sentiment shared by many in duck blinds around the state, but the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission sees it differently. Luke Naylor, a waterfowl biologist at AGFC, acknowledges, sure, recent seasons have been tough, but he's quick to point out that duck harvest estimates have been steady since the 1980s.
The good news is that Arkansas continues to lead the nation in duck harvest. It's in the top 5 in seasonal duck harvest per hunter.
Still, for duck hunters like Mosler, the math doesn't add up.
And I think it was Mark Twain who said there are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. I have no other evidence other than anecdotal evidence, and that is that when I go out to duck hunt, whether it's in Biomeda, whether it's in one of the rice fields around the Grand Prairie, we don't have the numbers we used to.
While sentiment for years past is low, now, on the dawn of a new season, anticipation is high among hunters. And according to Dr. Steve Adair, this year's season hinges largely on just that, a series of highs and lows. Pressure, that is.
Look north of you and look for snow cover. You know, when you get snowstorm and below freezing temperatures where that water can start to freeze, then that's going to force birds to move.
But to make Arkansas a desired destination?
You need water here. A lot of Arkansas duck populations, we've shown through some research, duck populations in Arkansas are really driven by extensive surface water flooding in the Delta.
While hunters will of course keep their eyes to the sky in anticipation of cold fronts and Arctic air that promote that southern migration, perhaps the truest indicator of the season to come isn't here in Arkansas at all. Rather, it's what's going on several thousands of miles away. It's the weather and the climate in the Canadian prairie pothole region of the upper Midwest.
The entire prairie pothole region in the US and Canada is dry. And what that means for waterfowl is that they will have a much reduced breeding effort. So we'll find that the birds are older, they're more experienced, they may not decoy as well.
Discouraging signs of the season to come.
Given current conditions, I wouldn't say the outlook is great for this season, actually. We have very poor production from the breeding grounds this year, it looks like.
That won't stop hunters from practicing the same patience they know all too well. Wading through frigid waters and enduring the disappointment of lackluster hunts, all in hopes that the future is as bright as winter sunrises in the Delta so often are. But the science suggests even more patience will be needed over the coming years.
The Canadian side still looks really dry and probably a pretty low chance of a frost seal there. So that means that likely next spring is going to stack up for another pretty dry year.
It takes some pretty significant precipitation events to recharge that soil and begin to hold water again.
Mosler, Naylor, and Adair, all three experts who approach the same issue with their own experience and expertise. And they agree that some of what we're seeing is a result of long-term impacts we're seeing on the weather.
The temperature's staying so warm up in the northern plains that they don't have any need to come down to Arkansas. And when they do come down, finally duck season's over.
Long-term changes in the climate, that's going to have an impact.
Our winter temperatures are getting warmer, and there's a pretty strong record for that.
And if we don't take care of what we've been given, not only do we lose out on a great deal of income, not only do we rob ourselves of a great deal of heritage, but we rob ourselves of an identity that few other states would be lucky enough to have.
Arkansas, for now, remains the duck capital of the world. Deep inside of the duck blind, watching, waiting, hoping, a practice of patience that's common for the many duck hunters who flock to the flooded rice fields and timberland of eastern Arkansas. But now their patience is being tested more than ever before.
I don't think duck numbers are what they used to be, just by observation alone, just by seeing them with my eyes and seeing them in places they used to be and where they're not there anymore.
Brent Birch literally wrote the book on duck hunting. He knows the problems this storied pastime is facing, and he took us along to see firsthand. You see, Birch has waded the cold waters of these fields for decades, taking advantage of the ideal conditions that bring millions of ducks to Arkansas every year. As much of the country freezes over, the natural state offers the birds their only two needs: a place to sleep and a meal to eat. But the problem now facing ducks and duck hunters alike, our ability to meet those two needs is changing.
Something happens with the habitat itself that changes where the ducks go, but I just don't think we're seeing the numbers. The habitat is better north of us. I don't think that's the only reason. I think part of it is we're not providing the habitat like we used to in the state.
Scientists like Dr. Ryan Askren, who's also a lifelong duck hunter, agree that warmer temperatures north of us don't give ducks much of a need to travel further south to spend their winters here.
If there is a strong warming trend in this region, we definitely could see a shift in ducks further north, which again, that's hard to kind of disentangle from other landscape level changes, but definitely could be impacting migration.
When winter conditions do force ducks to migrate south, they're looking for water. That's historically not been an issue in Arkansas, but that wasn't the case at the beginning of this past duck season when severe drought hung heavy over many hunters, all worried a lack of water would lead us to become a flyover state.
We were very concerned. A lot of the kind of whole region level habitat that's provided is based on rainwater during the fall, and I mean, it was so low that even if people did want to pump water out of like bayous and rivers, there wasn't enough water to flood a lot of these habitats, and that's huge. Obviously, if ducks are coming here and there's not habitat for them, especially once we start hunting them, there's just not much of a reason to stay here.
Fortunately for hunters, record flooding in the Delta midway through the season would eventually ease the droughts, leading to ducks falling into decoy spreads all throughout the Grand Prairie. And while it may sound like problem solved, don't forget the other half of the equation: food.
We're farming earlier and earlier, unfortunately. Rice is a huge food source. We're getting a lot more efficient with farming, which just means there's less and less food for ducks.
I understand farmers have to make a living and they have reasons why they do what they do, but some of that has been to the detriment of waterfowl.
When ducks aren't eating rice, they're likely eating acorns, and while improved farming techniques are already limiting one of those food sources, it's a practice going back decades that's now hurting the other. For years, bottomland forests have been artificially flooded to create habitat for ducks, and while water is important for ideal duck conditions, scientists have recently learned that too much of a good thing can be a problem.
We're flooding earlier than historically they would have been naturally, and we're leaving water on too long. So the earlier you put water on and the longer you leave it on in the spring starts hurting the health of those red oaks. It can hurt acorn production, and it can also just lead to species composition, tree composition that is less favorable to mallards.
Changes to our climate, enhanced farming practices, and outdated management of Arkansas's natural resources, all factors putting our state's favorite pastime at risk. But hunters and scientists alike agree what's at stake is worth fighting for.
We shouldn't take it for granted. We need to care for these ducks. If we're going to keep them here, we really need to be passionate about managing the habitat well, thinking about, you know, just taking care of them, not overhunting them, providing the food that they need, and providing the rest they need.
There's a bigger window than the 60 days of duck season that we got to take care of the ducks when they're in the state of Arkansas, and I believe that's a big part of our responsibility as hunters and landowners and habitat managers is to do all we can to help them have all the conditions they need to be good to go back north, so they'll come back next year with babies and more ducks, and it keeps building.
Duck culture in Arkansas is passionate and intense. The tradition is still grounded in duck hunting. It's extreme, and in a positive sense of that word.
No one knows this better than waterfowl biologist Luke Naylor, the man who for years has been tasked with preserving Arkansas's claim as the duck capital of the world. Now, though, on the dawn of another duck season, Naylor and his colleagues are faced with a new reality.
So the breeding population count for mallards is down about almost 50% in the past 6 or 7 years.
The alarming drop in the iconic green-headed mallard duck population is hardly news to Arkansas duck hunters who fear that the state's best days may be behind us. While Naylor rejects this notion, he's also realistic that the situation may get worse before it gets better.
There is a concern there. That's not doom and gloom, but there is a reality that I think some duck hunters are going to face in the future, that we may experience lower duck populations.
What exactly the problem is and how to fix it are typical conversations you'll hear in duck blinds across the state. But for Naylor, the focus remains on one thing.
It's still about the habitat.
Not just the habitat here in Arkansas, but as Naylor explains, the habitat in the upper Midwest where these ducks nest and live the rest of the year, it's vitally important too.
We can't forget that none of these ducks that are behind me right now were hatched in Arkansas. Zero.
A years-long drought on the prairies has hurt the breeding success of ducks, like the prized mallard. But so too have changes in farming practices and how wetlands are governed and protected up north.
We know that grassland loss and wetland loss, there's really just kind of two key components there that we have to work on collectively as a conservation community. And there's kind of the trajectory isn't all that positive in those regions right now, particularly in the Prairie Pottle region. Lots of grassland loss, lots of continued wetland loss.
Despite these clear and present challenges, newly published research shows that ducks are still choosing to migrate to Arkansas more than any other state.
We have good science coming out now that shows over a very long period of time the place where mallards still show up in the harvest is the Delta of Arkansas. That is the epicenter for mallard harvest. It was in the 1960s and it is in the 2010s all the way up through 2020.
Thank you, sir.
Naylor hopes this data will help ease the concerns of Arkansas hunters while also underscoring the importance of controlling what we can right here in our own backyard. It's the habitat.
In Arkansas, we still have the ability to have some control over our own destiny. Given the prairies keep sending us ducks, I think we're at a place where we can continue to provide habitat, continue to provide hunting opportunity, and it's going to still continue to be really, really good down here.
So that leads to the question thousands of hunters will be likely asking themselves and each other this weekend. How long will Arkansas stay the duck capital of the world?
Yes, duck populations may very well decline in the next 5 or 10 years. That seems somewhat likely, but with continued conservation efforts, rain on the prairies, they could bump right back up. So we always have to just continue to provide the habitat in our own backyard, help support conservation of the breeding grounds, and I think we're going to be okay for a while.
In Arkansas County, Scott Covert, THV11 News.